Hey, this is Michael Fineman. I'm here today with Marlon Mueller. I met him here at Board of Advisors. This is going to be an amazing talk. You won't want to miss it. How are you, brother?
Hey, I'm doing well and I appreciate this time.
Yeah, thank you. I was so intrigued by what we were talking about earlier when we met, and you were talking about some of the struggles generationally that you've dealt with,
Right.
And the farmland. And I'd love for you to just start at the beginning and share that amazing story.
So what's always interesting, a lot of people always talk about like generational wealth. My grandfather actually went through the Depression. So his whole thought process was don't ever have debt.
Right.
And my dad was just the opposite because farming requires a lot of times a lot of debt.
A lot of leverage.
Right. And so I had those two different scenarios playing out, one side saying no debt, the other and so forth. The interesting thing about that is I look back, it was really challenging times because as I was growing up, two things were happening. One is, the economy was changing, land prices started jumping up, interest rates started jumping up. The other thing that was happening as I was growing up was my great-grandfather, when he died in 1950, they couldn't find his will. We kind of know who took it, but long story short, when you don't have a will, then it goes intestate. Every state has a plan if you don't have a plan. And that's why I think it's so important. Most people don't think about it, don't have a plan. It's like, the state has a plan. It's probably not going to be what you want. So as I was growing up, my grandfather was always talking about his brother-in-laws and everything else and this conflict. And I thought it was from 1950.
Right.
So when I was in my 20s, I got introduced in a lawsuit because I also became part owner of that farm. And his sister, my grandfather's sister, sued us. So we're dealing with lawsuits, estate issues, and then, of course, the economy. And then what happened was land prices had gone up so much. So farmers were getting loans based on that high value of the land. Well, then when land values started dropping in the mid-'80s, they got in trouble. Their balance sheet didn't look well.
Sure, and also just to add to that, machinery started being introduced that wasn't there before, and the cost of that was astronomical.
It was going up.
But in order to maintain, because of the labor issues, they were buying machinery, right?
Yeah, it's not like the machinery today, but yeah, horsepower and everything else, bigger tractors, bigger equipment, stuff like that was being introduced.
So they're spending more money now,
yeah.
And that's why they were taking
But
these
they're
loans.
also buying, a lot of them were buying more land, stuff like
Right,
that.
trying to expand.
Right.
Okay.
And so anyway, we got kind of caught up in that, and I remember we went in to renew our note at the beginning of that year, and the banker said, well, boys, in order for us to renew your note, you're going to have to, we didn't have any of the land mortgage. We just had livestock and machinery. We had a lot of that. And he said, we're going to have to mortgage your land. And my first thought was, our note's less than it was last year. You didn't need our land. Why do you need our land? That was my first thought. So I asked someone a question that I thought was relevant. Why? and the guy's like, well, that's just how it is. That's the only answer he had.
That's not a great answer.
It was not a great answer.
Yeah.
And of course my dad's like, well, if that's what we're going to do, I guess we'll do it. And I said, no, I think this is what we need to do. We need to walk out of here and talk about that. And I remember I went to some of my business friends who were much wiser, much older, told them the situation, none of them said, you should do that. I just didn't understand the economy. I didn't understand money. I knew how to raise crops and all that kind of stuff. That's what I studied. So I had that going on, and then I had the estate issue, which ended up taking 34 years to close.
Wow.
I went from 1950 to 1984.
Wow. So what was the land in probate the entire time? Were you allowed to farm it?
Yeah, everything went on. It just that my grandfather's sister, and I actually built a spreadsheet when this was all done, because when I was analyzing what the lawyer had done when like my grandfather's brother died, and what his shares were, the lawyer had it wrong. We actually had to correct it in the next.
So the
documents.
percentages of
And
shares
percentages and all that were all
incorrect.
screwed up.
Wow.
Yeah, because it was so complicated. It was
Right,
really
sure.
complicated. I mean, it's the only way I could figure it out was having a spreadsheet.
Now, did you know what his will said? Was it much more clear cut, his will?
You mean my great-grandfather's?
Yes.
Yeah, it was supposed to be that my grandfather and his brother, because during the Depression, they lost one farm. And then my great-grandfather went to my grandfather and said, I need your help. I need your equipment to help me save this farm. And in the end, you and your brother will end up with the farm. So that was the end result. So I'm sure that the other side that found the will and stole it probably saw what was going to happen and took it. We kind of know who, but
Sure.
nobody
You
ever
mentioned
pointed
that,
a finger directly. But,
Right.
But the point of it really is, if you don't have a will, which a lot of people don't, you go, hey, do you got a will or a trust? And oh, no. It's like,
And then that led you into learning something new, didn't it?
well, yeah. So between the financial issues and the estate issues, in my 20s, I started going to estate planning.
Right.
And then I'm like, we got to understand how money works. Well, back then you didn't have internet, So one of the things I did was I ordered like Money Magazine and started reading that, or a salesman would come, and sell some, financial products. Like, well, this is going to make me wealthy. Oh yeah. Well, 5 years later, like it's not making me wealthy,
Right.
So all I did was I lost time and potential for money.
But you were in the school of hard knocks the whole time.
I have been in the school of hard knocks for years.
Yeah.
Lost lots of money,
Yeah.
lots of time. But in the end result was I kind of have it figured out today. And so part of what a lot of people have approached me is like, why aren't you teaching this, what you've learned, so others don't have to go to it? The funny thing was, one of the guys I've worked with, I always told him all I wanted was a mentor.
Right.
If I could have had a mentor in my early 30s even that said, do this, do this, do this, follow this, and you will become free. I didn't really have that. And there wasn't really, it's hard. It was hard back then. I mean, I'm in a rural, small town.
Sure. So there's also not a lot of large businessmen around to be mentored by.
No, and I didn't even understand mentorship. I just knew I wish I just had directions.
Yeah, it was hard anyway. Do you remember the book, The Millionaire Next Door?
I read that. Yeah, that
Me
was one
too.
that, yeah.
And I believed it. I thought it was fantastic.
Oh, me too.
But I could not find a mentor.
Yeah.
Even I knew men that were millionaires that just flat out said, I don't have time for that.
Oh, yeah. See, I always tell people, look for those guys and ask them.
Right.
Because there are some that their whole goal is to help others.
There are certain venues like Board of Advisors that we're here at now that offer that, but it's rare.
Right. And I think, so this one guy, when I was telling him, all I wanted was a mentor.
Yeah.
He looked at me and goes, you actually became that mentor. And I'm like, oh.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess I have.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what I started doing, was just mentoring other people and say, if you do this and do this. And that's how I kind of came up with my formula even.
Tell me about that.
So I have this formula, it's called M to the third power times IV times Y equals freedom.
What does it mean?
So M stands for money. And there's three things you need to understand about money. You need to learn how to control it, multiply it, and protect it. Because I remember I was involved with an indoor football team with some millionaires years and years ago, and one of the guys said, making money is easy, keeping it is hard. I was still in the making money mode. I'm like, that's not really that easy, But I understand that very well now, because you can have this money and you do some stupid investment or whatever else, and it just disappears,
Right.
Or even like, we had hail in our area probably 3 or 4 years ago. And some of my rental properties was like in the epicenter of it. I mean, huge hail. And I remember one of the properties, I had a bank note on it. I actually had quite a bit of it paid off already. But the bank required me to put that money in an escrow account. I'm like, no way. I said, if I can't control that money, you don't get it either. And so I never turned that check in until
What money did you put in
it was an insurance check.
the insurance check?
Right.
Okay, so the compensation for the damage.
Right.
Okay.
And it was pretty significant. I
Right.
mean, I had lots of money from
Sure.
these properties,
Sure.
and the bank had a couple of the properties, and so they just wanted to put it in escrow. And I'm like, it kind of reminded me back of the farm crisis where the bank was trying to screw me over.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, you guys are screwing me over because that's my money.
Right.
I'm like, where were you? And the one property, I put a new roof on it 3 years ago, and it actually was leaking because one of the tenants called, hey, Mr. Mueller, water's coming in from the roof. Oh, well, we better get it replaced, you know?
Sure.
And I was like, well, where were you when the bank, and, you know, the bank, telling the bank, where were you when the roof was really leaking?
Right,
You didn't care.
exactly. That's
And now
right.
that I had this brand new roof, sure, it's got some hail damage, but I could probably get 10 years out of that roof before I had to replace it,
Right.
which I would have done.
Right.
But because they required me to fix it before I got my money, so I said, well, if I don't get to control my money, you don't get it either, because I'm not going to put it in an escrow account so you can make money off my money.
Correct. So you went ahead and replaced the roof with it.
No, I sat on the check
Oh, really?
because there was too many roofers. So here's the thing, people just don't understand money. So what happened was all these roofers, I mean, they just converge on that hail damaged area.
Yes.
And they're like, yeah, we'll take care of everything. And what I saw was like all my neighbors and around the properties, my rental properties, all these roofs were being replaced, gutters, whatever else that, you know, they took full advantage of the insurance check.
Yes.
I looked at it and go, okay, this is a fairly new roof. Why do I have to replace the metal trimming around it? The garage door's got a few dimples in it. I can't really see them. It's a fairly brand new garage door.
Sure.
You know, so just to the properties that I fixed in that area, I made $17,000 off the insurance company, which is kind of stupid
Right.
because premium is going to go up.
It is.
But that's what everybody else, I'm looking at what everybody else did. They had all this money come into their hands.
Mm-hmm.
The banks held it, and then the roofing companies took it. And then, sure, they had new roof, new gutters, and everything else. But I'm like, who cares if the gutter's got a couple dimples in it?
Sure.
They still functional.
Sure.
I'd rather have the money.
So sitting on that check, how long can you sit on it before it becomes?
Oh, I had 6 months, and this is probably August when I got the check. So then, in December, I actually turned it in because what I did was I bought all the shingles and all that stuff for the roofs, and then they would release that money.
So you did end up giving it to the bank, but then they released it for the repairs.
Yeah, and they had maybe like 5,000, 6,000 of it still that next summer. Then I had the roofer. But I didn't want to do the roofing now because all the roofers are busy, top dollars they wanted and everything
Absolutely.
else. So I'm like, they're not going to leak yet. So I just waited till the next year, and then they're looking
Right.
for jobs.
I remember, I lived in Florida. So in 06, 07, Francis and Jean came through, or was it 04, 05, right about back then. And I think it was 04, 05. Francis and Jean hurricanes came through, one after the other.
Right.
I lived at Ground Zero in Port
Right.
St. Lucie. And I had gotten a quote on my roof for $7,000 to replace it. After the hurricane, it was 17, 18.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't have a choice because it ripped most of the shingles off between the two storms. But overall damage at that time was, it also came in the house. The house got wet because there was a third storm. And it was $87,000 worth of damage, but we all had citizen insurance because there was another insurance crisis back then.
Right.
And it took me a year and a half to get that money. And this was what's interesting when I talked to the mortgage company about it and said, look, right now I can't even live in the house.
Right.
It's damaged. Is there anything we can do? Can you put the note off? You know, anything like that? No help at all.
Right.
In fact, they were hoping to get it back
Oh, absolutely.
because the
Yeah.
prices had skyrocketed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And many people gave their houses up.
Right. Actually, you know, we did a study on like the 2008 crisis. I think the average was about $400 a month. If people had an extra $400 a month, they would have kept their houses. And you know, look at like 2008 to 2016 in our area, the prices kind of you know stayed pretty much the same, but then it just jumped.
Yes.
And so you just know that's going to happen. Everything
Yes.
cycles.
Yes.
So if they just hung on to it. But anyway, so I look at people just don't understand money. So that's why I say M3, control, multiply, learning how to multiply, and then protecting it.
And
Protecting it from losing it and all that kind of stuff, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to edit that. Yeah. So start
kinda
with
funny.
start with the money thing again.
Yeah, so M3, is control, multiply, and protect. And then you multiply that by IV. IV stands for investment vehicles.
Okay.
Most people are in the wrong investment vehicles. They're in mutual funds, 401ks, and stocks, bonds, and all that stuff. They're never going to get wealthy being in that kind of stuff. I mean, they can accumulate, but not create true wealth.
Sure.
And so I'm teaching people how to get into private equity type stuff, syndication, real estate, that kind of environment where you have a little more control over what the outcomes and stuff like that. What I always look for is three things. I want, where it'll value add, tax breaks, and some control over it that way. So, and that's usually real estate's just a great thing. I always tell people, it's like, if you looked at my real estate holdings and go, yeah, you're not making money, it's like, that's the whole point. On paper,
right.
I never make money. And it was always so funny because people go, well, you have to make money to be a business. Well, yeah, it's true. But like in farming, my whole goal is never to pay taxes, and especially not to pay Social Security tax, because I figure it's like, why? What's the point of it?
Right.
And so at the end of the year, we would just look like, okay, we'll buy extra seed. We're going to need in a couple months. We need more feed. We did whatever to just write off, so we never pay tax.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So it's just part of that control and understanding how money works. So then getting the right investment vehicles, and then times Y stands for you, which is your mindset. So many people tell me, hey, if I had $1 million, I'd have it made. I always tell them, if I gave you $1 million and you're a $100,000 person, you will take that $1 million down to 100,000.
Right.
Because you don't know how to handle it. You don't have the right mindset. You got to have the right mindset to get. It's like, if you have $1 million, you don't know how to handle $500 million.
Right.
You grow into it, and
right.
So that's how I kind of. It's just from my experiences. I looked at it. It's like, this is formula I created.
It's fantastic that you're handing that down.
Yeah.
It's absolutely unbelievable. And honestly, we talked about the millionaire next door. And so I think I've just found my money mentor, hopefully, right now. And I would love to talk to you about that, because that's something that if you don't go to school for money, or if you don't learn the hard way, if you don't learn about money, you don't know. And many people, I think, learn how to earn well, but don't know the other things that you're teaching. And there are teachers on both extremes, right? You have Robert Kiyosaki on one extreme of leverage, and you have Dave Ramsey on the other that says you only need to be in mutual funds and save your money and cut up your credit cards and don't really leverage anything.
So the thing is, you have to look at who's their audience.
Right.
So like Dave Ramsey, I remember my kids are pretty young then, so it's been a long time.
Yeah.
But our church was going through that course.
Yep.
And I didn't like everything he was really necessarily what he was teaching.
Right.
Part of it, so I used to be part owner of a debt negotiating company. So I understand debt and credit cards and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, credit cards is a great thing. I mean, the thing I don't like about credit cards is when they say $1, you spend $1 in your community and it'll rotate 7 times. Nobody thinks about this, but if you're using a credit card and a business pays 3% fee to the credit card company, they don't have $100, like a $1. Let's just call it $1. Sure. They don't have $1 anymore. They only have 97 cents.
Correct.
Do that 7 times. How much has that dollar been reduced every time it swings through your community? It could actually go to 0.
That's a great point.
So dollars in cash is actually better.
And which is why the surcharge, and they're trying to work around it. And now some laws say that they can actually charge that as a convenience fee.
Yeah. But then the other part of it is I use credit cards because I make money off credit cards. You get that 1%, 1.5%, 5%.
Costco's phenomenal for that. Yeah.
And so I look at it as like that cost goes to the consumer. But if I don't play the game, because I always say money is a game, you just got to know the rules and how to play it. So I'm like, okay, the rule is if I don't use my credit card, I'm still paying for that 5% or 1% or whatever else, but I'm not getting anything out of it, so I might as well use my credit card.
Right.
And then I take those dollars and then, I mean, they accumulate, and then I just,
Sure.
it'll use it on paying off a part of the bill or whatever else. But it's like free money. And so, but that's the point where Dave Ramsey's like, never use credit cards.
Right.
And I've actually had to counsel some people who followed Dave Ramsey for years, never had credit cards, finally got into a situation where they needed credit, but they had no credit score.
Right. Right.
They could afford it.
Right.
Maybe it's like buying a vehicle. They could afford the vehicle, afford the payments and everything else, no problem. But because they had
no
such
history.
they had such a low credit score because that they had to pay this high interest rate.
Yeah.
And the other thing a lot of people don't understand is credit scores are used for your insurance rates and everything else. So if you have lower
Right.
credit scores, you're actually paying higher
You're a
interest
higher
rates.
risk. There was a recent article, and I didn't read it. I just saw the headline that the current administration is looking to change the way that your credit is scored. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen that, but I kind of snicker because you look at the three bureaus, it's a moneymaker for them.
And nobody knows the formula.
Well, I do know a guy that kind of knows that stuff.
But that's rare to know.
Yeah, it's more about fundability.
Right.
It's not, your credit score is just so. It has one little meaning, but there's other things about that makes you more fundable for
Right.
banks and stuff like that. So that's another whole topic. But
So you're mentoring now more one-on-one as you meet people and helping them. Is that correct?
I have been.
Are you developing any type of system to teach more people?
Well, yes. So we're creating a system called Your Wealth Resource. And as you know, like in board advisors, lots of great resources here.
Sure.
You know, entity structures and attorneys and all that kind of stuff. And also my background of who I've dealt with. And so we want to bring that, not only the information, but then go, here are some resources, and not just give them one, but give them multiple
That's fantastic.
resources. So, because sometimes, you know, you click with one guy, but not another guy.
Sure.
You know, even like with, I got into banking through insurance. And some people call it infinite banking, bank
Right.
on yourself. There's tons
Being
of marketing.
your own bank.
There's tons of marketing
Sure.
arms, I
Sure.
call them. And it's kind of funny how I got into it, but once I figured it out, I just like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And so then I was testing out insurance agents. So I have lots of different policies, testing out insurance agents, because I'm like, there's probably something more to it that I don't know. And it took me a few years, because I've been in it a number of years, to figure out what really was going on and how to do it and how to really leverage it and stuff. So right now, I actually have some dollars that are working 3 times in 3 different vehicles, the same dollar.
Wow.
Because it started in my insurance, and I leveraged that to get into a real estate deal, which we refinanced, and we put it in another real estate deal.
That's unreal.
And
That's brilliant.
And I was hoping to do it 4 times, but because of interest rates and everything else, it hasn't played out yet. But
Yet.
yeah.
I think there's about to be blood on in the streets on that one.
Well, yeah, but I'm hoping to get out of a couple of those
Yeah.
other projects too.
Sure,
We've been
sure.
in them a while, so.
That's
but-
unreal. So this having to learn it yourself developed a passion to then mentor others and teach them. And after figuring out a system, you now have something that you can easily share.
Yeah, there's actually steps. You know, it's like, so like for me, the life insurance is like my base. That's, you know, I always talk about, you need an emergency fund.
Yes.
Well, where do you put that? Well, why not put it in the life insurance policy?
Sure.
And the way we build these is really different. It's not a typical policy. And if you have the right agent
Yes.
that I know, so if you're a real estate developer or a real estate investor, you don't really care so much about the death benefit. I mean, when you're dead and
Sure.
gone,
Sure.
you know, what's the point?
Sure.
You know, it's not. But they call them life insurance policies for a reason. You use them during your lifetime.
Sure.
And a lot of people don't understand this, but up until about definitely the 50s, even early 60s and stuff, until mutual funds and all that stuff came along, a lot of people actually use life insurance kind of as their little savings account.
Well, they were different policies, though. You know, and it's interesting because I've held my Series 66 twice.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into insurance, and I was brought in to be churned by a guy
Mm-hmm.
because I had great contacts.
Sure.
Didn't know any of that was going on, but he
Yeah.
got me pretty good. So he brought me in and really just used my contacts and dropped me. So, but what I learned was, you know, a whole life policy, somebody said, well, you know, whole life policies actually, because it has a level premium,
Mm-hmm.
will eat itself because the premium does go up, but now they're using the funds within the whole life policy to pay the additional. And I said, that can't be. And I read the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was fresh out of school for this, so the law was clear in my head. I was understanding it. I read the policy, and sure as could be, that's exactly what it did. Now, there are different products, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
all do that, but this is the one that I was supposed to be selling.
Mm.
And so this whole life and universal life was even worse.
Yeah, right.
And-
Universal was
It
built
was terrible.
during, because the stock market with mutual funds and everything else
Yeah.
was taking over the life insurance policies. So that's how they created the universal. And then in the 80s, when there was corrections and the life insurance policy started crashing, and then there was all these lawsuits and stuff.
And this is when Art
Yeah.
Williams came in with Primerica and said,
Yeah.
buy term and invest the rest.
And actually, that
which
was
was
about the
great.
time when I ended up being sold a policy that was a decreasing term with an annuity at
Yes.
26.
Wow.
Who should buy annuities at 26?
Not at 26.
No.
Term was perfect at 26.
No, this is a decreasing term.
I'm saying, though, a standard term,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know, 30-year
would have
term
been,
would have been great.
yeah.
And I ended up in Primerica
I did
selling
too.
those because those, to me, that was the good guys.
Yeah.
I still buy my term policy
Yeah.
from Primerica because they have a great product.
Yeah.
But you're renting security until you don't need it anymore.
Right.
And that's all it was. But now
Right.
what you're talking about is using different types of insurance policies as actually cash vehicles to create
Right.
your own flow of, you know, banking
Yeah,
opportunities.
so
and
that's my emergency fund.
Yeah.
That's my go-to fund.
So you
Like,
can
so if
cash
I need
anytime
to
you
buy a
can cash that out.
car, instead of going to the bank,
Right.
I've actually never had a bank loan for
Right.
cars. But if I had to, I can go to my policy instead, and it's simple interest. It's not like a mortgage where
Right.
you're paying all the interest up front on car loans and home loans.
Sure.
And it's also my wealth creation fund. So you create the wealth in there, and a deal comes along, say, you just go, hey, pull that money out.
It almost works like a HELOC then, right? Type.
Pretty much,
Product?
yeah.
Yeah,
Except
interesting.
that, unlike going to, so here's the difference. There's really three ways to create money. You can just borrow it. Well, first of all, you can just save it and
Yes.
have it.
Yes.
But so let's use $50,000. So you work 5 years to save $50,000,
Sure.
and then you go. Let's say you go buy a vehicle with it.
Mm-hmm.
You have the vehicle, but now you no longer have that $50,000.
And you have a depreciating asset.
Right, and then that 50. So now you got to do it again.
Right.
Or the other thing is you can borrow the money,
Mm-hmm.
buy the vehicle, and then you, instead of just putting that money back in to save it over 5 more years to have another 50,000, you're actually paying off that 50,000 plus interest. But either way, when that money is spent or paid back, it's just gone.
Right.
Now, put it in a life insurance policy that I use.
Mm-hmm.
I borrow against that money. So I pull against that 50,000
Yes.
out of the policy. But did that money stop making me money?
Is it gaining interest in that policy?
Yeah, the dividends are being paid on it.
Okay.
It never stops.
So it has not,
No.
because you've just taken a loan.
Yeah. So maybe I'm getting 4.5%, and I borrow the money at 5.5%.
Right.
So I really only have 1% spread.
That's unreal.
Yeah. But here's the kicker. Unlike having it in the bank in cash or borrowing against it, if I die, my family only gets the 50,000 that's sitting in the bank, or they have to pay off that 50,000. That's it. But if I have that 50,000, say, in a policy that's worth 200,000, now what happens? The life insurance first pays off that 50,000 I borrowed against the policy,
Right.
and then they paid the 150,000 to my beneficiaries.
Wow. That's great. That's very, very interesting. I can't wait to learn about that. That's
Yeah.
going to be amazing.
And then there's so many other little tricks about it that I've learned.
Yeah.
And like you, I was in Prime America, and then That was what? When was that? When did you get in? Like
Gosh.
89 maybe or something like that?
No, it was a while ago for me, but
Oh,
I would say it was around 1990. No, I'm sorry. It was probably around 2000.
oh,
Then.
okay.
Yeah.
So I was in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in it way back. Probably, yeah, it would have been 89 or something.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
AOA. It was still AOAs back
yeah,
then.
but you're aging yourself. I was
Yeah.
just graduating
Yeah.
high school.
Yeah, I'm only 45.
Yeah, you actually don't
Yeah,
look that much
yeah,
older than me, so that's
yeah.
interesting.
So anyway, yeah, so I did that, and then somewhere in the 1990s, I read where they had changed the longevity of insurance policies.
Mhm.
They took them out to like 120 years.
Right.
I thought I had the A.L. Williams policy. I think it was a 20-year. I thought, what if I check the rates and stuff? So when I went out there, I went to A.L. Williams or Prime America at that time, and I went to a few other ones, and I actually found a different one policy that I could actually increase my policy at a 15-year and pay about the same amount because of the extended life that they recalculate the life expectancy.
The morbidity rate.
Yes.
Okay, got it. So
Yeah.
you were able to run a slightly shorter policy with a higher payout,
Right.
with a much lesser.
Yeah, because I think I was at
Premium.
maybe at 10 years on my
Wow.
20-year.
Wow.
So then I created a new
So you
15-year.
actually went higher.
Yeah, with more.
So you added 5 years, added payout, and
Right.
decreased your premium.
Well, it paid about the same.
That's still, you decreased your premium,
Well,
basically, in the
yeah,
end.
yeah.
Yes.
And so,
'Cause of
you
the
know,
time.
yeah, and so, but the investing the difference was kind of tough.
Right.
And so when I finally, I'm not going to go through how I came across this, but when I decided to re-educate myself on life insurance, I just started, let me just see what's out there. And that's how I came across this infinite banking, bank on yourself, all these different, just started
Sure.
reading through that. And then I remember I read the infinite banking book. I think it's called Becoming Your Banker, or something like that. And there was an illustration in there that the light bulb just went bing. It's like, oh my gosh, I should have been doing this,
Yeah.
And so I remember I went to a friend of mine he was a bigwig in Prime America. In fact, he sold his business and he's living off it.
Yeah.
And I said, look what I just found. And he goes, oh no, he goes, let me bring over a guy, and so he came over and it's the same spiel. It's like,
Sure.
Seriously,
Right. Yeah.
So I went ahead with it and just played with it and figured it out. And so that's why I'm like, this is just genius,
Yeah.
to be able to do this and to leverage the money and still have the protection and all that kind of stuff. And then to understand like percentages, what I do and how I do it, stuff like that I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone should really be doing this. This is to me is like the
Yeah.
base of your financial plan.
Right.
And then create the cash, and then we'll go into, get your entity structures corrected,
Interesting.
your trust. So like I have a trust that owns my holding company. It's a Wyoming holding company. And then my Wyoming holding company owns my other entity structures and stuff. So if anything ever happens to me, the new trustees take over and nothing stops.
That's fantastic.
Just like when I had my parents, when I had them have a trust, it became irrevocable after both of them died.
Right.
All I did was walk into the bank, sign the signature card to the checking account.
And you had full access.
Yeah, nothing stopped.
Right.
There was nothing else I had to do.
So this 30-some year lawsuit taught you to make sure that never happens in your family again.
Well, I just spent a lot of, and that journey wasn't that easy because when I said we got to do something different, I was going to state
Sure.
planning meetings, and they're talking about wills and all that kind of stuff, and I'm like, I saw what wills do. They sue against wills and they get changed
Right.
and all that stuff. It's
Yeah.
like, no, I wanted something more, and I wanted something that was more longevity,
More
too.
substantial.
And so
Wow.
one of our neighbors, who is also a businessman and stuff, he came across this trust company, And he was heading that direction. So, yeah, let's do that, And so we're heading that direction. Well, then the people got put into federal prison.
That were putting the program together.
Yeah, the trust.
Great.
Something about, I don't know, I couldn't even explain it today, but there was something about how you didn't have to pay taxes and all that kind of stuff. It sounded really great,
Yes.
at the time.
Yes.
And like, well, okay, so not all trusts are equal,
Sure.
And yeah, so it's just that, I was like, oh my gosh, I banged my head against the wall so many times, or just even investing, one time, I remember a guy said, just throw a lot of money on the wall and see what sticks. So I was investing in all these startup companies because I had a real estate deal, did really well. And I remember I was like, oh, throw some money here, threw some money there, threw some money there. And some were actually doing something, but then it was like, I almost should write a book like how you can lose money on startup companies. And it's not like it's just because they ran out of money. Like one of them was the IRS went at, it was actually the debt negotiating company. So we had hooked up with a lot of smaller companies, and the IRS wanted to go after smaller companies. So what they came after us to get to the smaller companies.
Sure.
Guess what the smaller companies do? They leave you. Kill their business overnight.
Sure.
It's just stupid stuff,
You should write a book.
And so I was like, I always tell people, yeah, I threw all the mud on the wall and mine got whitewashed.
That's amazing. Yes. So how many kids do you have?
2 boys.
2 boys. And how old are they now?
Early 30s.
And have you taught them these things? Do they understand it?
So here's what's interesting. So I was also in a networking business in my early 20s and 30s, and always listening to tapes, reading books, and all that kind of stuff. Because people always talk about, you got to learn to wake up happy and go get it. I don't even think about what is my mood today. I just wake up happy. I've trained myself through all that tapes and books and all that kind of stuff.
Just to be grateful and happy.
Yeah, I just look forward to every day.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I remember I took my boys, I was a financial coach in one group, teaching people how to become millionaires. And I took my young son there one time, just a number of years ago. And it was a 3-day event. And of course, they're parading people like lawyers, insurance, entity, all that kind of stuff. And some of the people are coming to me, it's like, oh my gosh, my head's just swimming, all this information. And it's like, don't try to figure it all out in one day. I mean, just do one step. Just take one step, and do, it's a process. And so after the 3 days, I asked my young son, it's like, so what'd you get out of this? Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really get anything. It's like, seriously? He goes, well, geez, Dad, you've been talking about this. And, when you were listening to tapes, we were listening to the same tapes.
That's right.
Because car on wheels,
You know what? I can relate to that completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then he goes, but I did see some of the people that, kind of made it, and I look at them and I go, man, if they can make it, I can make it. So, well, that's a good thing to know.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So I thought, that was valuable.
That's amazing. You don't realize what they're picking up. And my son would listen to, I listened to Les Brown and Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and so many pastors and, all the time in the car. And I just never paid attention to the fact that he was listening. I knew he was, but I didn't realize he knew these people like I knew these people.
Right.
And I remember I went to a Gary Cassie event in Ohio. He was a great pastor. I loved him. And I was there, and he was right in vicinity when my son called. And I always pick up when my son calls, unless I absolutely can't. I pick, hey, buddy, what's up? And he heard Gary Cassie in the background, and he said, is that Gary Cassie? And I said, yes. He was like 11 or 12.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, you want to talk to him? He said, yeah.
Wow.
It was great, but you don't realize what they're picking up. And,
Right.
and in fact, one time he said, can I hold your guitar? And I said, sure. And I handed it to him. And he started playing it.
Right.
He didn't know how to play guitar, but I've been playing for him to go to sleep every night his whole life. And he's just been watching my fingers on the chord board, on the chord, the chords I was making. And he said, well, I just learned the pattern, Dad. It's amazing what they pick up. So did both of them pick up like that?
Right. Yeah.
Both boys?
Right.
They've got it.
Yeah. I mean, they both understand, not that maybe to the level I have, because they haven't had the experiences.
Right.
Something about experiences that you just can't
Yes.
replace.
No. Hard
you
times
yeah.
work things out,
Yeah.
don't they?
Yeah. You don't want them to go through it all. I mean, if I can say, hey, skip this step, and they listen, yeah. I mean, my boys have cash value policies and stuff.
Sure.
And they're, I learned how to make them really efficient.
Yes.
And so I build it this way. In fact,
Yes.
my youngest one, I made him get his license.
That's
We
great.
need somebody in the family
That's
to have
great.
a license. I don't want to do that again.
But I made reference to it earlier. All of this was created based on a trial and a hard time that you went through, created the need for you to do something better.
Yeah, everything I teach, I've done.
That's great.
It's not like, this is a theory I think you should try.
Sure.
And this is what I've gone through. This is what I've learned. These are the hard knocks I've
Yes.
had to
I
deal with.
understand that well.
And, I'm going to share what I've gone through. You can
Yes.
take it or not.
Yes.
That's how I view it. It's not
And
like,
having gone through every stage as a dad coach, I've been a single dad, I've been a married father, I've had stepchildren, I've tried to co-parent with someone who wasn't easy to co-parent with.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in almost every situation you could imagine as a father, which makes me a great coach
Mm-hmm.
because I've been through a lot of different things that I've experienced that I can not only empathize with men, but
Mm-hmm.
also help guide them through and share the stories that got me out of it as well. And I created all kinds of things similar to what you did
Mm-hmm.
to create scenarios where that would never happen again and teach my son in a way that it would never happen to him.
That's really interesting because, when I was farming with my grandfather, which was actually my mother's father, and
Yeah.
then my dad.
Yeah.
And that kind of bond to have that generational working together, I mean, it's kind of lost.
I talk about this
Yeah.
all the time. So
Yeah.
you guys probably lived on the same property.
Well, no,
Or
we
close,
had,
right?
Oh yeah, it was
Right.
2 miles apart.
Okay, this is what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. And that, in the farming community, that was normal. In fact,
Right.
right before you, the generation before, they were in the same house. Because
Sometimes, yeah.
well, they just didn't have the money to have different houses.
Oh.
So a lot of them, right? And so they would just live in a big house.
Yeah.
The kids would stay, or they'd build up a house next door,
Mm-hmm.
but it would be very, very within close proximity.
Right.
And the grandfather would be teaching the grandkids.
Right.
And when that was lost, and America started, moving to Pittsburgh, and one lives in Ohio or whatever, and it started getting further and further, we lost not just that training from grandfather to
Right.
and grandmother to grandchildren, but also we lost the sense of family
Right.
and closeness and community.
Right.
Because the grandfather had friends that he had been friends with for 60 years that were the next door neighbors. And each generation became friends just by fruition.
Right.
And we just lost that 75 years ago.
Right.
Maybe less. And I feel like we need to bring that together. You see people doing compounds now
Right.
with their families, bringing them together. You see a
Like
lot
Freedom Farms and some of these things.
and
that are
underserved
coming,
community is starting to build like family trusts where they all invest together as a group. And I hope that's the trend that continues, because I think that it will help solve the issues in America that we're dealing with.
So what's always funny about societies is they swing to the right, they swing to the left. So, I think we're going to see that kind of more of a swing, because just like these younger kids, they've seen like their parents going through their jobs, losing their retirement funds through
Sure.
stock market drops,
Sure.
everything else. Like, so why'd you work all that time and you get what? So
Right.
yeah, so there's a lot of things that are going to change. Actually, talking about your, I know you're talking about doing like a dad's program.
I have one going, yeah.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit
Fatherhood
about that.
Yeah, the fatherhood code is, my own story is pretty long and drawn out, and we'll save that for another day. But I did not have the direction and training from a father on how to be a father. And so
Okay.
when I got married at 30, I became a stepfather for 3 children. I love them very much. I did my best, but there were a lot of things I just didn't know to do. So I did what I was taught, which was not good, because it wasn't good for me either. Well, I had a biological son as well in the mix while we were married, and the marriage failed due to my brokenness and hers as well. And I found myself as a single father looking at my son, and I said, okay, I really want to be good at this. Like, the one thing that I want for him is to have an amazing dad. I want to break the cycle. I'm going to change everything. And it all started one morning when the sunshine was hitting him just right. He was playing with Legos. He was about, 7. I'm sitting on the couch drinking coffee, and I'm like, this is a beautiful human. How Who do I want him to become?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started journaling, and it went on for days.
Mm.
And once I was done journaling, I looked at everything, and I just asked God, how do I help him become this man?
Wow.
And the response I wrote was, you first need to become that man yourself. And so I learned that I had to work on myself. I had to become the man that my son could follow to become the man I wanted him to become. And that's what I did. And so because I was able to do that, because I remember the procedure, because we had so many other life interrupts, he and I together, consistent wedge trying to be, created by his mom, who was just, had issues and was broken. And it wasn't, I don't think it was on purpose. I think it was just hurt people. And so was always trying to drive a wedge, but then at one point or another looked at it and said, wow, thank you, you're a great dad. And kind of let off at that point. And so that gave me the ability to start really training him up in the way he should go. And all of the things that I planned for him, all of the things I prayed for him, he's 10 times that already. Because I was intentional about making a plan and intentional about helping him live that plan out and keeping myself accountable. And I was able to reverse engineer that. And when I realized that, I realized I could help other men. So I've just been helping other men. Friends would come to me, single moms, hey, could you help this lady? Can you help this guy? This woman's having a hard time with her son. She's a single mom. Can you talk to her? This guy is struggling. His kids won't talk to him. Can you talk to him? And I've been doing this for a long time. I've been very passionate about. So I decided to build something big out of it. And so the new program is the Fatherhood Code. We have Top Gun dads within, boy, mom. And the new driving persona is that dad guy. I'm going to be known as that dad guy. And so I'm building all of this out. I probably would have held back if not for BA, but being around a lot of people that have really been successful and built big, amazing things, I realized that a tree grows as big as it can. I have no business trying to stunt that. And the fruit that comes off of the tree is not for me, it's for others. And so my job is to grow this as big as I can, reach as far out as I can on those branches to help as many fathers become great fathers as I possibly can. And that's my calling and purpose now.
Wow. It's always so interesting. So, like for me, my mess was the finances and the state. So that's what I delved into.
Right.
Yours was being a father and figuring that out. And in a sense, you have probably a formula.
I do. I absolutely do. I haven't named it as cool of a formula as you have, but I do talk to men about making a plan. And I say, you go into a business meeting and you know exactly what you want from that meeting. You have a plan, you've researched a company, you're going to get a commitment of something, time, another appointment, a purchase. You know what you're doing. But then when it comes to your kids, you say, well, we're doing the best we can. There's no instruction manual. Right. And that drives me crazy because
there is an instruction manual.
Yes, it is. It's the Word of God, right. Which is really powerful. And I teach men about that. When I believed in popping a kid on the butt when they were little, and not everybody does, but I believed in that.
I do too.
And I would show him in the Word. I would say, listen, it says right here that if I spare the rod, I hate you. I don't hate you. I love you more than anything. So I'm being obedient to my Father. I'm teaching you to be obedient to me so that you can learn to be obedient to him. Because I will be with you for the rest of my life, but not for the rest of yours. And I need to know when I go that you know who he is. And right now at 18, he is on fire. Most of the texts I get from her are questions about the Bible, which is fantastic. And he's making rap music, and I love him. I support everything he did, but I didn't like the verbiage. And I just told him, I can't, my hands are tied. I cannot support you on this. I love the beat. I love the tone. But I don't want to hear those words, dude. And that's not your life. And so.
It will become.
Well, now he's making Christian underground rap. I did not do that. The Lord did that. So he's now making Christian underground rap, and his skill set has probably quadrupled in 4 months. Every month, he just gets better and better. And I showed it. There was a few people here that were musicians and producers. I showed them the music, and they said, how long has he been doing this? Can you introduce him to me? And they're asking for this, and I know the doors are going to open for him. He also agreed to be my handler when I go do speaking events and my event coordinator at events.
Wow.
So the cool thing is my son is going to do this with me for a while.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm very excited about that.
That is really awesome. So I guess for me, I would encourage you to just keep moving forward on that,
Thank you.
because so many fathers, or even absent, so I actually should say, what I should say is so many kids don't have the fathers in their life.
Right.
Absent fathers, all that kind of stuff, whether they're living there, being absent, or just even away. So
Presence is
yeah,
key, and
yeah.
the biggest issue that men who didn't have a father like they needed to talk about
Yeah.
is a lack of presence. And
Yeah.
so that's number one goal, but also just to help them heal and forgive their
Yeah.
fathers so they can move on and be great fathers. And I will continue, and I love what you're doing. I'm glad you're going to build this out, because this next generation needs you. And one thing I say about my son all the time is I want my ceiling to be his floor.
Mm-hmm.
And if you will train the younger generation to do what you're doing, then your ceiling will be their floor, and off they go.
Right.
And so kudos to you for creating
Right.
that. And I'm excited to learn it myself from you.
All right. Well, this has been a great time
Yes,
visiting with
thank
you, getting to know you even a little bit
Absolutely.
more, and appreciate this time.
What a blessing. Thank you, Marlon.
You too. See ya.